Hello, Sanna. Do take your seat.
Hi. I'm so happy to be here. You know, I was walking this morning outside, and as a fellow Nordic, I was like, oh, Copenhagen looks so nice. I should really move here. But you know, all the Nordic countries at summertime, it's always so nice, and then wintertime we're all like curled up. So yeah, it looks nice. Happy to be here.
As the audience, we've broken the fourth wall here because we're also recording our Power Play podcast for Politico with you. So I might just do an introduction, which will seem strange as you've just met her, just for the podcast, for the audience who are going to be hearing this beyond. So I'm joined here on stage for... see, that's this podcasting, it's everything twice. I'm joined here on stage at the Copenhagen Democracy Summit by Sanna Marin, former Prime Minister of Finland, and it's going to be a live recording of Power Play. Hi there, Sanna.
Hi, very nice to be here.
Well, listen, it's a huge election year. We have 500 million Europeans going to the polls in just a few weeks' time. A lot of sense that democracy is under threat, and I know that and resilience to keep building societies, allow them to sort of keep rolling with the punches in some senses, is front of mind for you. What do you think democracies need to do more of faster to protect themselves and to get that resilience?
Well, I think if we look at the world today, actually, the basic values that we have all stood by and behind are being challenged. The whole international rule-based order is being challenged by authoritarian countries. Democracy is being more and more challenged by the same powers, but also within democracies. So we hear all these voices that are actually saying that the values that we have been so long being behind is being questioned. And I think it's a very fair and important question to ask right now, because there is a European election coming up, US election coming up, this year, Indian election. So this is a big election year all across the world in big democracies. It's a fair and very important question to ask, what is the state of democracy today? When we look at the European stage, we can see that there is more and more populistic far-right parties gaining support from people, more parties with also that kind of like pro-Russian connections, and it's very worrying. And now when we look at the election campaigns and think and trying to see ahead what will happen, the big question is, of course, also can the more traditional political parties still have the majority in European Union, or what will this right-wing shift that we're seeing all across Europe mean for European politics, what it will mean about the support of Ukraine, what it will mean about the basic values that European countries share. So it's a very important election year and very dramatic one, I think.
Let me just interject a question there. I mean, one way of reading that is if you speak to audiences like this, you get a sense of, yes, we really must do something about this. I mean, we could be a bit more self-critical, perhaps, and say, where do you think traditional parties, or those who support those very solid liberal democratic values, whether they're centre-left, centre-right, whatever their national inflections, what have they been getting wrong?
Well, I think this is a multi-layered question. If you look back history, there's always been right-wing forces. There's always been frustration amongst people. There's always been parties and forces that want people to react on fear or anger. So it's not a new phenomenon. Have this kind of right-wing, very radical forces that are changing and challenging the system. So it's not a new phenomenon. I think what I would say more traditional parties should do, I think they should also look at the mirror. Have we really met the needs of the people? For example, nowadays people in Europe, they're not only worrying about the war or the current geopolitical situation, they're also worried about their own livelihood. They're worried about the high energy costs. They are worried about their everyday lives, how their children, their parents, their close ones are coping with the current situation with the high inflation. For example, so have we met the needs of the people? I think that's always a fair question, because if you are neglected and you feel that you're not seen in the society, then you're much more likely to also vote for parties and forces that are giving you easy answers and saying that if you vote for us, you will get cheap gasoline and you will get cheap food and you will get cheap everyday life costs. And that's like the rooting place for also radical movement and radical, very now, unfortunately, very right-wing forces.
And given your advocacy, I'm just curious, are you tempted to head back into election politics or maybe to Brussels if the right role came up in this crucial year in the European Union?
I'm not looking for institutional positions. I have some knowledge and personal experience about being in an institutional position as former Prime Minister of Finland. I'm doing still the same work, talking about geopolitics, about human rights, equality, the rule-based order, climate, loss of biodiversity, but on different ways. So talking events like this, meeting a lot of people. I work with Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, so advising governments, leaders, head of states. So I think the job itself is rewarding and also global. So I can speak to more global audience.
Is that a final farewell to elected
I wouldn't
politics?
say final. I would never say never. And you should never close all the doors. But I think at this stage, I can do the things that I really love, talk about the issues that are passionate for me, and still do it from a different position than institutional position, because it also restricts you. You will always, if you're prime minister, you will represent your government, and you will represent the collective decision-making of your own government and your own parliament. Now I'm free, so I can say whatever I want. So that's nice.
Please do. That's exactly why we want to talk to you. But it did strike me that when you left office, that seemed to be almost a part of a wave of prominent female politicians who, for various reasons, sometimes absolutely fair fight in front of the electorate, just got edged out. It was a tight race for you, but you didn't win it. But then we've seen Angela Merkel, the end of her years in power. We've seen a lot of, to sort of some of the kind of poster women of progressive politics have fallen by the wayside. Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland has done so somewhat dramatically, actually. In the UK, do you feel, Jacinda Ardern might be another good example, a way away, but there was a sense perhaps of a community and a new generation and style of women in politics. Do you think that's in retreat?
Well, I think there's also a misconception that there were like this big group of women. There never were. There were some. There were me, Jacinda. There were other leaders, Mette Frederiksen, of course, Giorgia Meloni, Angela Merkel. So there has been women leaders and leadership. But when you look at the overall, the UN countries, women has always been only a handful of the leaders. So we have always had that like huge gap between genders on the leadership positions. So there never was actually like a rise of women. There were always too few women, and there's still too few women. So that's a problem that we should really tackle and look within the societies. What are the structures that actually prevent women to get those leadership positions, whether it's in politics, whether it's in business, in private sector? And there is a gap also in Nordic countries. I think we have had more women leadership in Nordic countries because of our society model than elsewhere, but still there's still a gap also in the Nordics, and we should really ask, why is this? Are we supporting women enough? Because women are not worse than men. They are not incapable. They are not smart. They are very capable. They are talented. They are brave. They are very capable to do that kind of job, to have those kind of like top leadership positions. But for some reason, our societies are built in a way that actually prevent women to reach those positions. And there are many reasons, many kind of structures that prevent women to get those positions. And I think we should really tackle it all across. So I don't agree that there was like this emerging leadership amongst women. There never was, always too few.
Let's turn to the global tech race, which I know is a subject that you work a lot on and bring your experience as a leader to bear. And Finland's long been a powerhouse in technology, Nokia, Angry Birds, cybersecurity. etc. But when it comes to scaling and staying at the front of that competitive race with America, let alone taking on that challenge of China, which over the last few years has looked like in some ways more of a threat in the technological race than any sort of ally that you can kind of rely on. How do you think that balance is best conducted by leaders who have to both advise on technology but also don't want to hold back the innovation that Europe badly needs?
Well, I would take a step backwards and look why technology is so important and why we should talk about technology, especially in Europe and in democratic countries. I governed a country during a period of serious crises. First, we met COVID, a huge global pandemic that challenged us all. We were all caught up by surprise. So it really was a big hit in our societies. Then we faced a war in Europe, energy crisis, so major crises that actually showed the vulnerabilities within our societies. We weren't prepared enough, even though some countries were more prepared, but nobody was prepared enough. And during COVID, we noticed that we lacked medical supply, we lacked medicine, we lacked all that kind of manufacturing capabilities that we really needed. So we needed to boost it up very fast, but it was a big and major challenge. So we lacked those, and those were outsourced to low-price countries, especially in Asia. Then the war came, and we witnessed that we were lacking and we weren't prepared when it comes to defense, when it comes to energy, because Putin used energy as a leverage, as a tool, as a weapon against Europe. And we also faced other kind of challenges within our societies that we weren't prepared enough for difficult times. And when we look into the future, one thing that will emerge and rise is the new technologies. And we have to ask ourselves now, before it's too late, are we enough prepared for upcoming crises when it comes to digital world, when it comes to new technologies, AI, quantum mechanics, all the things that our societies will be built on?
So, but I just wanted to bring it a bit to the point.
Yeah, I will come to that.
Do you think we've got the mix right? And how do you see that mix between EU legislation and the US?
I will come to that. I'm coming to my point, sorry. So we have to look at our societies. Are we prepared enough for those kind of challenges that will come? I will tell you, it will come. It's not like, will there be something bad happening? There will be something bad happening. And we cannot, as democratic countries and societies in Europe or elsewhere, put ourselves in a position where we can be blackmailed when it comes to these new technologies, whether it's microchips or whether it's semiconductors or natural resources that we desperately need to build those different technologies that we rely on. If we put ourselves in that kind of position, when it comes to technologies, we are super vulnerable and we will put ourselves in a risk in so many ways. Societal risk, but also risk in our economies and businesses. And that's why I'm talking about technology so much. So we should really be prepared for difficult times to come, because the difficult times will come and we cannot be reliant on authoritarian countries like we were on energy with Russia. You don't build semiconductor factories over a year. You need 10 years, and that's why we need to talk about this now.
I wonder, that's a great answer, I think. I wonder whether the companies have listened perhaps as fast as you would like. And I was thinking of that example in Finland with Huawei signing that licensing patent agreement with Ericsson. That happened just before you left office, although there'd been basically a pushback of Huawei from 5G in so many other countries. I mean, I don't know whether you felt that you weren't able to influence that decision as much as you would have liked to have done so, but it did seem to slightly undermine that quest to protect intellectual property. And can you just sort of comment on that?
When it comes to these kind of networks capabilities, we have three companies worldwide. We have the Finnish one, Nokia, then Swedish one, Ericsson, and then the Chinese one, Huawei. And I think we need European companies, we need democratic state companies to build the technologies that we rely on. And China has pushed this technology breakthrough and investments, foreign investments with heavy money. It's not market-based or market-oriented. It's been built with Chinese governmental money to try to hijack different markets across the world and then put the countries in a position where you are reliant on the technology and on the product of a Chinese company.
Ericsson?
Sorry?
Is that a point that you made in this context of the Huawei agreement with Ericsson? Because that's a classic example. You know,
well, Ericsson is a Swedish company, so no, Finnish government didn't have any positioning
I
about
phrased that badly. Would you say that when you come to these sort of individual decisions, that governments and friendly governments who talk to each other and make the same kind of point that you're making should be more assertive?
Well, I see it in a way that European countries should really think from whom to buy. And you should have also other kind of evaluation and also other kind of criteria than the price. Because there are risks when it comes to technologies, especially from the countries where governments are so linked in these, you would say, private companies that are not in a such sense private like Western companies are. But for example, in Finland, we have policy that we don't interfere. We don't intervene with private companies' decision making. So of course we respect that kind of way of acting. But I would ask the question in a way: if you are building your network in Europe or somewhere else, do you want your network to be built on authoritarian based companies? And do you want to give your data and your information to these companies? I would be very cautious.
So you would take a strong advocacy role,
and
even if you didn't want to intervene directly?
Well, now, as I said, I'm former Prime Minister, and I can speak quite freely.
You can indeed. Do you think the AI Act that the EU it has now on the books will do enough to counter the threats of AI-generated content where they collide with democracy and where there's potential for deepfakes and other abuse?
Well, I think it's very important that we educate people. Deepfakes, there's so much material out there that's not real. That's worry number one, that there's so much material that are not real. But when we look at the state of democracy and the elections that we discussed earlier, the problem isn't only that there's false news and fake something. The problem is also that people know it's fake, but they will still share because it supports their ideology, it supports their way of thinking. And I think one of the things that we should really worry about is the search for truth. And I really hope that it's not over, that we would still want, as citizens, that kind of place where we would search truth together, where we could have a platform, where we could have a discussion and conversation based on shared knowledge and shared facts. And what worries me is that the world's social media, but also I also think also traditional media is being polarized, and the stories that are more polarized and mostly negative sells more. And this is a big threat to democracies, that we don't anymore have that platform where people could share same facts and have an honest discussion, even though you might agree or disagree.
Another aspect of resilience, because I know you're sort of very involved with Ukraine and supporting Ukraine and how democracies can do that in practical terms. And I think Finland has been very lauded for this national service model and the way that it's used that and modernised that and sort of kept sort of people involved in that. Do you think national service and the idea of a mandatory national service at a time when the theme of this conference in some ways has been a kind of reality check about defence and security and what it needs to defend democracies, is that a conversation that you think needs to be opened up much more widely?
Well, I think, of course, different countries can have different models for self-defense and in defense. But for Finland, there's a reason why we still have this mandatory military service. And the reason is the 1,300 kilometers of border with Russia. We have had our troubles with Russia before. We have been in dozens of wars with Russia over the past 700 years. So we know what kind of aggressor and neighbor we have. And that's why Finland has always been a country that has invested on its own defense. For example, during our governmental period, we invested heavily on new fighter jets, new fleet, and still also worked with all the renewing of our military forces. And we had this parliamentary group that looked at our military service-based model and then thought, what is the future of it? So it's very important for Finnish people to make sure that our defense is on place and that we have those capabilities. And I think the whole Europe have to wake up, because we all have that aggression, even though there are still countries that are farther away from the border and they don't feel the fear like the countries that are near the border of Russia feel, but still Russia is a neighbor of Europe. And then we need that kind of very strong military and defense capabilities to prevent wars.
As you say, it may not be the same situation as it is like in a country like Finland with a huge border with Russia, but it's been a sort of touchy subject really among centre-left governments, not only, but I think governments have been a bit loath to go into that idea of would there be some form of mandatory or near-mandatory national service. I suppose I'm just wondering, given that the debate is raging in the UK, in Germany and France, that I know, and probably a bit beyond, do you think it's something that we ought to take more seriously?
Well, we need to take it more seriously, and I think Germany plays a big role. It's a very difficult period for Germany because of the historical package. So it's understandable that Germany has had certain kind of policy when it comes to defense. It's very understandable for historical perspective. And now there's this big shift and turn when it comes to defense and really gain those capabilities again. But we need strong Germany within Europe, because Germany is the biggest country in Europe and in European Union. So we need strong Germany, and I would send my best to German people that please do invest in defense, please do invest in making Europe secure and safe. And we all, Finland, Germany, France, Denmark, everybody needs to really make sure that we have those capabilities, that we do not only depend on US help, because we also have to make sure that our own backyard is safe and secure, and we need to be better partners when it comes to partnerships in NATO, being NATO countries. So we need to make sure that our backyard is also clean.
Well, you said the NATO no word as a last thought here. You played a major role in getting Finland on that accession path and into NATO. In a way, you're always going to be in the history books for that. Is that something you think will be a kind of highlight of your political career?
Well, I'm very happy that Finland is a part of NATO, and we are a member of NATO because of Russia, because Russia attacked Ukraine. Without the war, Finland wouldn't have made the decision when we made the decision. So it was because of the action and the violent attack against Ukraine why Finland did that decision during our governmental period. I'm very happy that we are now a member of NATO. But, as a woman, I don't think that we think so much like being part of the history books. Like maybe that's for somebody else, but I'm very happy that we made that decision. It was the right one to do. And now we have to make sure that the NATO countries are more capable also in Europe.
Sanna, Marin, thank you very much for joining us here today on Power Play and in Copenhagen.
Thank you. Thank you.